we have to start with that very grim news that we've been reporting throughout the day here on Times Radio. Devastating news, of course, for the families involved, as we now know a death toll of at least 40 people and around 100 injured after a fire in a bar in the Swiss Alps on New Year's Eve. The cause of the fire at La Constellation in Crans-Montana is unknown. Terrorism has now been ruled out. Well, David Chazan writes for The Times from France. Hi there, David.
Hello there.
Hi. Happy New Year, even though such grim
Thank
news to be talking about. What have we learned then from this press conference that's been going on in the last hour or so?
Well, the death toll that you just gave of around 40 and something like 115 people injured that was announced at this second presser of the day gives us a clearer idea of the number of dead. Before that, the authorities were only saying that dozens of people had been died, but frankly, it didn't add that much. One thing that the officials did stress, however, was that identifying the bodies may take days because some of them are so badly burned that they cannot be identified by sight alone. So DNA and dental tests will have to be carried out. Very grim indeed.
And I suppose that means as well several days for families to have bodies returned to them.
Well, that's right. One of the things that the Swiss president and the local police chief said was that many families were still in a state of uncertainty because some people have been trying to trace their loved ones. They may not be responding to text messages or phone calls, either because they're in hospital or, more tragically, because they may have been killed. And so we've been seeing on social media lots of terribly sad messages from parents and relatives of the mainly teenagers who were in this bar, asking if anyone has heard anything about them. So it may be really awful for families who have to wait days for news of either their children or their brothers, sisters, relatives.
Yeah. And my understanding as well is that there's rules in Switzerland around telling the media before they've told the families, right? So there are actually legal restrictions on numbers and what can be reported until everyone's been told.
Yes, that's right. I mean, there's really the same legal restriction, or much the same as there is in the UK, which is that the next of kin must be notified before the authorities will name anyone to journalists. But what we've been hearing throughout the day from Swiss officials is that in this case, first of all, because of the problems of identification, it will take days before the next of kin are notified. And secondly, they're saying even in cases where people have been identified and the next of kin has been notified, they don't want to reveal the names for the time being because they say the families are still grieving and they want to respect their privacy.
David, thank you for that. Just on a completely different subject, but I mentioned it a moment ago, we're going to be talking about it in half an hour or so's time. President Macron, he's clamped down on smartphone and social media use for the under-16s. I'm just curious whether you think that's going to be a popular policy in France and whether it says something that, despite his unpopularity, that's the policy he's putting out there.
Well, I think it's going to be an extremely popular policy, particularly among parents, and opinion polls have suggested that an overwhelming majority of French people will back this move. It's something that a lot of parents' associations have been clamouring for a very long time. And as you say, despite President Macron's unpopularity, despite this merry-go-round of successive weak minority governments that we've seen over the past year or so, ever since President Macron called snap parliamentary elections, I think he will be able to get this through Parliament. He's been unable to get Parliament to pass a budget for 2026, which is very much overdue, but this one is expected to go through Parliament very smoothly, and it's also going to be presented to the Conseil d'État, the State Council, which rules on the legality and the constitutionality of new laws. That is going to happen this month, within days.
Interesting. Thank you for that, David. Good to speak to you.
Yeah, we arrived around 1:20 in the morning. I think the incident happened about 5 minutes by the time we had arrived. And it was really the worst time when we arrived. There was, I think, only 1 or 2 police cars by then. So first responders were not here yet. And by the time everything ended, I mean, everyone got together, everyone did what they could. All the nearby residences, restaurants, everyone who was still awake helped, either with water, tea, blankets. It was a big shock, right? Everyone was very cold inside, and they come out suddenly, they're freezing temperature. So I think that was one of the biggest issues, was the smoke, the fire, but also the temperature extreme difference. I'd say there were three phases to what happened last night. There was the actual fire and the incident itself, which we civilians, pedestrians, were staying far away from, understandably. And then first of all, they were brought to 1900, which is the bar at the back. That was the main area where there was really the burn victims. Of course, you can only fit so many people in there, so there were a lot of people who were outside as well. So again, one of the key things to do was to keep them warm and take care of their temperature of the body. And then secondly, the second phase, UBS, so the bank next to the co-op, they opened up. And then that's where it's brighter, there's more space. So that's where kind of the main first aid took place, the triage as well of the different levels of the victims. I'd say by the time it was maybe 5:30 was maybe when the last victim was emptied out. Not much. I just want to say there's a help hotline. We had a lot of calls this morning from parents who couldn't find their kids, who are driving from wherever country they're from. So know that there's a help hotline. I'm sure you can put that on to be able to identify your child, because a lot of them are not in Switzerland anymore.
It seems like a very huge tragedy with several people died and others who are injured in the different Swiss hospitals for the moment. I know I am in this station since 30 years already, and for my remembrance, I see the things like that for the first time. Well, look already on the faces of the people. Some of them come with the flowers, so everybody seems like concerned by this tragedy. It is a tragedy because the majority, I imagine, of the people touched by this drama, they are the young people who came for the holidays here in the mountains. It is really, really sad. It is really sad.